this is Diane Mourglia-Swerdlow with another edition of Healthy Living for Expansions.com. Today we are going to make my version of a German chocolate cake, which, as you know, is a healthy cake. So even though it's dessert, it's one you can enjoy. So I'm going to start off down here. I have 3 cake pans, and I've shown you how to put the wax paper in the bottom, but I'll show you again. Here I have 3 sheets. I'm just going to set the pans here, take my pencil, draw a circle around it, and then use my kitchen shears. Cut out the circle. And of course we want these in the bottom of the pan, otherwise when you turn it over, it's highly likely to stick. And of course, if we're going to do a layer cake, we don't want that. Now, if you do not have round pans, you can always use a rectangular pan. You just will bake it not quite as, or actually probably a little bit longer. And I just turn them upside down, put them inside of each one. And I like to do this before I start stirring up my ingredients, because then it's ready when my cake is done. So I use the coconut oil spray. This will help the wax paper come off the bottom once this is tipped upside down. So you can see it's not a lengthy process. So the cake pans are ready. I've gone ahead and prepared a few things for you. I'm going to start here with my flour. And what I have done is I have already ground 1 cup of buckwheat. And remember, buckwheat is an herb, not a flour. And 1.5 cups of almonds. So I ground my almonds into flour. You can buy it, of course, already, but as you know, I like to do my own in my nut grinder. And then here I have 1 cup of butter, or 2 cubes, that I've gone ahead and melted. Now you can also soften it if you like, but for me, I'm usually in a hurry, so I went ahead and melted it. And while I'm stirring up the cake, you can see here that I have chopped up a bar of organic, this is 70% cacao. So this is a 3.5 ounce bar. You can do 4 ounces, 4.5 ounces, whatever your bar is. And I'm going to let that melt while I'm stirring up the cake. So I'm going to put in 1/2 cup of, not quite boiling, but almost, and stir this around. Now, German chocolate cake is not a real strong chocolate cake. It's actually very mild. So this I'm going to let sit here while I do everything else. Melt, cool off a little bit, and this will be one of the last things that we add. But you do want to make sure that your chocolate is melted. And I just break up my bar. So let's let that sit for a minute. And then back over here to the cake, I have the butter that's melted, so that's going to go in. Stir that around because it gives it a little bit of a chance to cool off. I have 1 cup of coconut crystals. That's going to go in. Now, as you know, I work a lot with keeping a lower glycemic index or carb count. If you want, you can add more sugar. And again, you may want to try it as I am making it, and then you may decide you want more. But to keep the carb count down and to add bulk, I'm going to use about 3/4 cup of my homemade applesauce. Now, somebody had asked me before if there's something they can use instead of applesauce, and I said, well, no, but as I thought about it, you can also use banana. But banana is high in sugar, so if your goal is to keep the carb count low, you're better off to go even buy some unsweetened applesauce and use that. However, if that's not your goal, then my suggestion is I would add 1/2 more cup, up to 3/4 cup of the coconut crystals, because this particular brand, as I said, is very low on the glycemic index. And I'm going to put in about 1/4 teaspoon of stevia to help with the sweetener. If you put in too much, it's going to be bitter. So again, I'm just going to do about 1/4 teaspoon And of course I like the Now brand, as I've told you before. And that will help just give it a little bit more oomph since it is a cake. I have in here 1 teaspoon of sea salt, fleur de sel, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, aluminum free. That's going to go in. Okay, and you can see some of my almonds are showing. You can take them out or you can leave them in. I'll leave mine in because my family's used to it, but again, it's up to you. And I have organic vanilla, about 1 teaspoon of that. It's going to go in. Okay, and for more liquid, I have coconut milk. Now this is sugar-free. It is sweetened with stevia and it's vanilla flavored. So it'll add a little bit of sweetness to the cake without really putting in any sugar. It's only about 2 carbs for 1 cup, and I'm going to be putting in 1 cup. So this is going in. And you notice I like to do my things by hand more than I like the mixers, but if you have a mixer, of course, you can do that too. And once I get this stirred up, I'm going to go back and check my chocolate to see how that's doing. As you can see, the ingredients we're using are basically healthy. And of course you do need some sugar, which are provided by your carbs, and a little bit of the coconut secret. Okay, so that's coming along very nicely. So I'm going to come back over here and check my chocolate. That's pretty melted, as you can see, but I'm going to let that cool just a little bit more before we add it. Now, while all of that's going on, over here I have some eggs. And again, I've shown you before how to separate them, but I'm going to show you again because, as I said, I might make it look easy because I've done it so much. And for me it is, but it might take you a little bit of time. So, we're going to separate the egg whites from the egg yolks. I did 2. I just open it up and let the, oh, this one cracked. Let that go in. And now, I've told you before that I don't really like that little thing on the edge of the egg yolk, so I get rid of it. You can't really see it, but the next one you probably will. So crack this one open. There we go. And you can see that little thing. That's what I take off and throw away. I don't particularly like that in my cakes. You may not mind it. But anyway, so that's going in. Then I use my eggshell to go in there and get that little white thing off. And that's going to go into the garbage. And if you drop any pieces of eggshell in there, the best way to get it out is with the eggshell itself, the half. Now, you may be tempted to say, oh, it's a tiny little piece, or 1 or 2 little pieces, I'll leave it, nobody will notice. Well, I guarantee you that somebody will notice. When you bite on an eggshell, which I have done, it feels like a rock or a pebble in your mouth. I don't know why, but it magnifies like 1,000,000,000 times. So, I have my 4 egg yolks. They're going to go in now. And you can see the batter is turning out really nicely. Okay. And I'm going to come over here and get my chocolate. The chocolate is going to go in next. Remember what I told you, it's a milder cake. And if you want, you can use a higher percent or a lower percentage of cacao with a higher percentage of sugar to sweeten it a little bit if you want. It's up to you. So this is going to go in and flavor it. Now if you have a traditional white flour, it is going to be, of course, a little bit darker chocolate. But as I said, German chocolate to me is more like a milk chocolate cake versus a dark chocolate cake. And I have done dark chocolate desserts with you, so you kind of know the difference. Okay, now the next step is with our egg whites. Now for this you do need either a hand egg beater, which is what I used to do when I was a child, and I've done this in various ways. We're going to beat these egg whites and gently fold them in. I've done them with egg beaters by hand, I've done them with electric egg beaters, I've done them in my Cuisinart. Today we're going to use this emulsifier and see how that works. So, let's see what happens. I found out that the immersion tool doesn't work. I think it started to cook the egg yolks. So I replaced the egg yolks, I'm using my hand mixer, and now you can see with just a couple of seconds it's nice and fluffy, which is the way it's supposed to be. So I'm going to finish it off so you can watch. Not to use the immersion tool, and we want stiff peaks. These are soft, so I'm going to do just a tiny bit more and we'll be done. Alright, so you can see those are nice stiff peaks, and that's the goal. So back here and stir the batter around. Now what we're going to do is we're going to gently fold this in. And this is our last step before we put it into the cake pans and into the oven. Just going to gently fold that in. And the purpose of beating it separately is it makes your cake a little bit lighter. Now this is a homemade cake, and homemade cakes are always a lot heavier than what you get in a box or a store, generally speaking. But it does give it just a little different texture. If you don't have a hand beater, they're very convenient. As you can see, I obviously needed it. And I like my emulsifier for soups and things like that, but apparently not for egg whites. So gently folding this in. Let's see what this little bump is. Okay. Alright, and you don't want to over stir because you'll take all the air out and kind of defeat your purpose of what you just did. So now we go back to the cake pans over here, which are ready. And we're going to, as best as we can, evenly divide the batter between the three pans. And then of course when we put it in the oven, we're going to bake it at 350 for probably close to 30 minutes, although I will check it about 20 minutes because you don't want to overbake. For myself personally, I like a moister cake. I don't like it all dried out. But you do your best, and whatever it is, it is. Okay. And of course when you put it in, do your best so your cake pans do not touch each other or the sides of your oven, because that will change the baking temperature. Okay, it looks nice. Now I'm going to take a paper towel and clean it up a little bit around the edges, because otherwise that's just going to bake onto your cake pan and make a mess. It's easier to clean it up now than after it's baked on. Okay, so 350 degrees for about 30 minutes, but I'm going to check it. Oops, I thought I had my oven on. It's one of those days. So I'm going to have to preheat that, and as soon as it's preheated, I'll put it in, and then we'll check it out in about 20-30 minutes. The cakes are in the oven now. I've got the timer set for 20 minutes. I'm going to check it at 20, although I think it's going to be closer to 30 before it's done. So while that's baking, we're going to make the frosting. Now I have here 1 cup of organic pecans, and I'm going to chop those up because this is one of the last things we're going to put in. You can leave them whole if you want, but I think it makes it a little nicer texture if that they're chopped. And you can use any nuts actually, but a traditional German chocolate cake uses pecans, and I happen to think pecans are a little sweeter and I really like them. But if you can't find them, which is possible, I order mine online in bulk. You can substitute walnuts if you like those. You could put almonds in. I mean, again, you know, what you have available to you, use that. But I like pecans in a variety of things, so I try to keep a few on hand because I like the flavor, I like the texture, and they happen to be one of my family favorites. And you can chop them up, as I said, finely, coarsely, whatever works. Notice how I'm keeping my fingers out from underneath the blade. So whenever you use your knife, be careful. All right, now over here we have my pot. I'm going to turn it on about medium-high. I have evaporated goat milk, and I buy this online. You can also use evaporated organic regular cow's milk, of course, too. The recipe calls for 1 cup. So that's going to go in. And I have 1 cup of my organic coconut secret crystals. That's going to go in. I have 1/2 cup of butter. This is going to go in. 1 teaspoon of organic vanilla flavoring. That's going to go in. And I have 3 egg yolks. A couple of them broke. That's all right. I'm just going to get stirred in. Now you want to stir this up and get everything mixed up before the pan gets too hot, because otherwise the egg yolks are going to separate, and then you're going to have egg floating in your frosting, which you don't want to do. So all of this I'm going to bring to a low boil, and then I'm going to stir it until it thickens, and it's probably going to take around 10 or 12 minutes. So as soon as we kind of get this done, I'll let you take a break. I will keep stirring, and then when we will come back, and at the very end we're going to add in our pecans and our coconut, and then this will cool. So when the cake comes out of the oven and it's ready to be frosted, because it has to cool, they'll both be cooled. We'll put it together and you'll see what a beautiful party cake this is. So you can see everything has mixed together in here. You cannot see the egg yolks. The egg yolks is part of our thickening. So you do definitely need those in there. But do that before your pan gets hot, or you're going to have frosting with egg, which is not too much fun. Alright, so I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, it's been almost 12 minutes. You can see how nice and thick that this has gotten. And that's the way we want it. And it was on low heat, because if you put it too high, it's just going to boil and bubble, and a low simmer is what we need. And then I'm going to add in 1.25 cups of unsweetened coconut. So be sure you get unsweetened, or it's going to really make a difference in your carb count. And it will soak up a lot of this liquid too and make it a nice spreading consistency eventually. And then I have the pecans that we chopped up before. Those are going to go in. Okay. And this is a thick frosting, so this will not go on the side of our cake. In a typical German chocolate cake, they only frost in between the layers. So, you can see how nice this is. It's been nice and thick. I'm going to set this aside and let this cool. And when my cake comes out, let that cool, and then we'll put it together and we'll have a really lovely dessert. Alright, so I've had them in here for about 30 minutes. You can see they're nice and springy. I did my toothpick test. Let's just check. Yeah, it comes out clean, so you know that the cakes are done. Really nice. And now I'm going to take my knife and just go around the outside of the edges, because that will help them come loose when I turn them upside down on my cooling racks. Now, if you don't have round pans, like I told you, you can do a 9 by 12 pan and just put it in there, and your baking time will be a little bit different. You want to remember we have that nice wax paper in the bottom, so these should all come out really well. Some delicious tomato soup heating for my wonderful husband. And I hope you watched that podcast of the tomato soup, because it was really one of our favorites. Very good. Alright, so I have my baking racks here, my cooling racks, with a little bit of wax paper on the top. It's going to go on top. Remember, the pans are hot. And this is the time to take them out. Don't wait for them to cool. Flip it over, and this should come right off. Okay, and then we're going to peel off that. You can see the steam coming off. It's hot, and this has got to cool before we can put that frosting on. Okay, so again, the rack's going to go upside down. Going to hold it, flip it. And this is hot, so either use your hot mat or get a fork or something, but don't touch it. It's so easy to forget sometimes and burn yourself. I've done that a billion times, trust me. Okay, so that one's done. And we have our third one to go. This is going to go here. I'm going to flip it. And I'm going to let it cool for 2 or 3 hours, because again, you want it cool. Now, I like to bake my cakes the day I serve them, because there's nothing like a fresh cake. But you can, of course, always do it the day before. It's up to, again, your time schedule. But I try and plan it this way because I like it fresh. Okay, so these 3 are going to sit here and cool, and I'm going to give Stewart some of this delicious tomato soup. And hopefully he can wait till later and we'll all have some German chocolate cake, but I'll show you how that's coming together in a little bit once these are cool. The cakes feel like they're nice and cooled off. So what I'm going to do is take my plate, put it on this one, and just flip it over. Pull out the wax paper, and that's good. Now, I was looking at my frosting, and my frosting is pretty thick, and I want to make it a little bit more spreadable. So I have a little bit of my goat milk, the evaporated milk. I'm just going to put it in, and so that this is, you don't want much, maybe a tablespoon or 2. Just make it a little bit more spreadable. And what happens with the coconut, especially the unsweetened coconut, is that it absorbs a lot of that liquid. And that's what's happened here. This is delicious, but I want to make it just a little more spreadable. So maybe about another teaspoon. The other thing you can do if you wanted, you could heat a little bit more butter and put it in. Even a drop or 2 of water will help. Okay, so that's good. So we're gonna divide it, because we're gonna put some on top of each layer. So you have to keep that in mind. So you want it basically divided into about 3 portions. And you just kind of go to the edge of your cake. And this is very rich and very sweet, even with the little bit of sugar that I have in here. Okay, and let me get another, take this knife and kind of pat this around a little bit, smooth it down. With the German chocolate cake, I generally don't frost the edges. I only do them between the layers. Now if you want, you could even add whipped cream or something like that around the edges of it if you wanted to, but I kind of like the look. So here we go with the next layer. It goes on top. About another third of our delicious frosting on top. Let's kind of spread that around to your edges. And once you start eating this cake, because you should anyway, but especially because of the milk and the eggs and the frosting, it needs to go into the refrigerator. And then when you serve it, you can always take it out a little bit in advance so it comes to room temperature. Oops. But definitely, once you start eating this cake, you need to put it into your refrigerator. And also, it makes a nice presentation once you cut it and the filling shows into the open slices. Okay, and then we have the third layer. And that goes right on top. You can see it's a really lovely cake, a nice presentation. Goes on top. It looks like I've got quite a bit, so if I have any left over, I'll probably just kind of shove it in the little crevices there. Let's see how it goes. The whole cake, including the frosting, the way I have made it, has approximately 450 carbs. And I cut it into 16 pieces. I'll cut it this way, and then each quarter will be cut into quarters. And remember, this is a 3-layer cake, so a 1/16 of this cake is actually plenty for a dessert serving. And so if you take the 450 carbs divided by 16, we're actually even a little bit under 30 carbs per slice. And of course, that's a rough estimate. But compared to a normal cake, which could have 100 or so, I'd say we're doing pretty good. And like I said, it's a little bit thicker on the top, but it's okay. And I have just a tiny bit, so I'm going to put some in here in the little crevasses, just to use it up. Let's see if there are any other places. Oh, you can see it kind of slides over a bit. But, you know, as I tell you many times, we're making this at home. We're not professional bakers who make these things every day. It tastes good. The presentation is nice. And I'm happy if overall I can have a good product. And as I said, something like this is more like food. So you have to remember that. So even though you have 30 carbs, think what your 30 carbs are in. You have your nuts, you have the buckwheat flour, you have almond flour. So these are all foods for your body. And then, like I said, if you wanted, you know, you could do whipped cream around the outside. You could do a chocolate ganache around the outside. There are a lot of things you can do. Use your imagination, whatever you enjoy. But I'm going to leave my cake like this. And as I said, when it's time to serve, I'll do 16 slices. And 1/16 is plenty of dessert, especially for something that really is food. So I want to thank you for joining me, Diane Mourglia-Swerdlow, another edition of HealthyLivingForExpansions.com. Bye-bye now.